Yeah. Do we are all three experts? Is that Kai over there? Kai, that's Kai there? Okay.
And as I said, so we got people, lots of people are doing on, like they're watching at home. You can do the past
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here for this important conversation this evening. And I want to welcome those of you who are here at Mount Zion, and also to welcome the many who are joining us online. We're very grateful for your presence this evening. I am Christine Lund, Principal Dean at Martin Luther University College, and I'm very grateful that we get a chance to have the conversation about faithful elections in Waterloo region. As is customary at all public events sponsored by Luther, we will begin by acknowledging the land where we live, and I would like to call on Carol Pinnock to give us the land acknowledgement tonight.
Thank you, Chris. Good evening. We are walking hand in hand on this bountiful land, which is part of the Grand River watershed, traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Neutral peoples, fellow sojourners with us. The Holloman Tract we're on is land granted to the Six Nations, 6 miles on both sides, all along the Grand River. Rosemary Sadler calls to our attention the many people of African descent whose ancestors were forcibly displaced as part of the Atlantic slave trade, brought here against their will, and made to work on these lands. Acknowledging that African Canadians were and are an integral part of shaping Canadian history. The first named being translator Matthew da Costa by 1604, we acknowledge the contribution that he made and those who preceded and follow him in Canada's development. Today, you and I give thanks to the Creator for the great land on which we reside. We recognize our collective responsibility, both treaty people and those brought here, to seek a new and excellent relationship with the first peoples of this land, one based in honor and deep respect, and also to care for the land and the waters that nourish us and give us strength, as the first peoples have done and from which we continue to benefit. We acknowledge that it is our duty to do more to learn about the rich history of this land and its first peoples, to better understand our role as residents, neighbors, caretakers, and sojourners.
Thank you so much, Carol, for that land acknowledgement. Oh, sorry. Maybe I'll just get closer to the mic. Thank you, Carol. Since 2015, the Center for Public Ethics at Martin Luther University College has been sponsoring election forums during each provincial and federal election campaign. These forums focus on social justice issues of particular importance to our region's faith communities, such as poverty, the climate crisis, and access to quality health care. Our goal is to give these issues the prominence they deserve, as well as educate voters on how they impact our region. To that end, we invite experts in each area to give an overview of the issue and provide the background needed for a wider discussion. We also want to share the response of the various political parties running in the election to each issue and invited each political party to send a local candidate to participate in tonight's discussion. Invitations were sent to all 4 political parties, and I'm pleased that 3 have chosen to send a local candidate: the Greens, the Liberals, and the NDP. To moderate tonight's event, we are delighted to be joined by Craig Norris, host of CBC's KW Morning Edition, and I'm very grateful for your willingness to be the moderator tonight, Craig. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you to facilitate what I trust will be a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Christine. How about a hand for Christine, everyone? Now, the way the night is going to work is that it's going to be broken into 4 different segments. The first 3 are going to focus on issues of importance in this campaign. We will have an expert give a brief overview of the issue, up to 10 minutes or so, and then each candidate will have 4 minutes to respond. I will introduce the candidates now. Sitting farthest away from me is the Liberal Party candidate for Waterloo, Clayton Moore. In the middle is the Waterloo NDP candidate, Catherine Fife. And right here is the Green Party candidate for Kitchener Centre, Ashlyn Clancy. Now, the 4th segment is going to involve questions from you, the audience. Now, that's going to be both here in the room, and thank you all for braving the weather and coming out tonight, and also for the people who are watching on the live stream. I assume that's the camera back there. If not, I look like an idiot. So to facilitate this process, we are asking people to submit questions in writing, and we have ushers in the room with cards and pens for people who want to submit questions. Those watching the session live, as well as any audience members who want to submit their questions via email, can submit to them to Emily Waitson. Emily's right here and in the room, and then you can also email Waitson, that is EWAITSON @WLU.ca. And I think at home there might be a slide with her email address on it as well. We are going to move to the first segment, poverty, housing, and homelessness. Tony D'Amato Storts is a familiar name, no doubt, in this region. He is the principal and founder of Better Street. That is a Toronto-based organization that supports initiatives aimed at combating homelessness. He is originally from Waterloo region, where he has extensive experience working on homelessness initiatives, including a Better Tent City. Please join me in welcoming Tony D'Amato Storts.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks to the candidates. Can y'all hear me at the back? Okay, perfect, right on. Yes, so I'm really excited to be here and chat with you today. I'll confess, a little part of me was hoping I wouldn't have to go first so I could see how all the other experts did this, but I'm excited to be talking today. So as Craig mentioned, my background in housing and homelessness started in Waterloo region, and it's moved through a lot of different organizations here. I started becoming interested in homelessness as a student at University of Guelph, working with Habitat for Humanity to build homes both here and in the US. And then it really hit a crux point for me when I was late in my university career and a family member had lost their housing and was living on the street in downtown Kitchener. And I saw them sleeping in an ATM vestibule, and was, you know, it was disturbing, it was difficult, but it didn't really hit me until later when I was at a Home Depot. And I saw the lumber aisle and the plywood and the windows, and realized that everything we needed to provide better housing for people was actually in that building. We're in the second biggest country in the world. It's full of trees. We have lumber. We have the ability to solve this problem. And so that led me down this path, working at the Working Center as a fundraiser, working on the Mayor's Dinner, an outreach worker at House of Friendship, working at St. Mary's Parish to help launch Tiny Home Takeout, and also at a Better Tent City as the site superintendent. The preamble will end soon, and I'll get into the interesting stuff. But I just wanted to start with that because through all those experiences, I realized that the problems we face around poverty and homelessness are not problems of resource. We are one of the wealthiest countries in the world. We are one of the largest countries in the world. We are a space that has so much, but it's a problem of allocation. And so much of that allocation lives at the provincial level, so I'm really glad to be able to be here today and hear from our candidates for provincial office about how they see those problems and the way they feel we can move forward in a more humane and just way. So before I go into the statistics and into the numbers that I'm sure you've heard lots, I want to preface it with something that for me helps me to really understand this. And, you know, when you have to talk about homelessness as much as I do, and when you hear about it as much as I'm sure you have in this room, sometimes the numbers just start feeling like miles to Pluto. There's so much need, there's so many people who are looking for it, and everything seems to get worse. And you know, what's the difference between a 7.9% increase in rent and an 8.3% increase in rent? It doesn't feel like anything. So, to try to make that feel a little bit more human and contextualize the numbers, I'm going to put a little story to it, and then we'll talk about the numbers, and then I'll ask the candidates, or I'll ask the questions that I'm hoping we can get answered today. And this is a tool I use. I call it the whirlpool and the cliff to talk about poverty and homelessness in our community. And the cliff is poverty, deep poverty, addictions, mental health issues. And there are more and more people in our community hanging on to the edge of this cliff. They're paycheck to paycheck, they're working poor, they're accessing the food bank, and they're trying to make it work and keep their housing. And then there's the whirlpool, and that's the water below. And that's the experience of becoming homeless. When you lose your housing, it's a destabilizing thing to have happen. You lose your belongings, you lose your status in society in so many ways. You stop being looked at by other people as a person, and the opportunities you have to bring your situation back become fewer and fewer and fewer. And the best way I can think about that is as a whirlpool. You hit the water and you don't know the current that's underneath, but slowly and methodically it spins you and spins you and spins you until the land feels so far away you couldn't get back there. And when you look at the statistics in Waterloo region, it's very clear that the cliff is eroding, that there's water coming up against the rocks, and the rocks are falling, and the land is sliding in, and every time that happens, more and more people fall into that whirlpool. And I say this to sort of give some context to the fact that Ontario Works rates as of July 2024 for shelter, if you're someone who can't find employment, is $390 a month. I don't know if any of y'all have been in the rental game recently. I have. I live with roommates. Not a super cool thing to say when you have a microphone, but it's very true. And there's nothing, right? There's nothing in that bracket. If you're on Ontario disability, which means a medical professional, who we're going to hear from later tonight, has confirmed that you cannot work, you get $582 for your shelter allowance. And to make sure that I had good information about this, I spent a couple minutes before coming here on Kijiji. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go into the position of somebody who is on ODSP and is looking for housing. I'm going to pretend that that's my position right now. What can I find in Waterloo region? In the Kitchener area, for under $582 a month, there were 13 options. One of them I'm pretty sure was a scam. So I'm going to say 12. And every single one of them was a shared bedroom. I'm not talking about a shared apartment. I'm not talking about, you know, having a roommate and having to figure out who cleans the washroom, every other week. I'm talking 2 or 3 people who don't know each other sharing a queen bed in a basement in the suburbs. That's what we've allowed for the people with a disability. With the people who a doctor has confirmed can't work, getting on ODSP is difficult. So many people on OW have a disability or are between things. There was nothing for $390 a month. In a community this size, 0 housing. That's erosion. So it's clear we have a housing affordability crisis. Rent for a vacant room is up 141% since 2005. It went up 8.9% in 2023, 7.3% in 2022. And that affordability crisis, that erosion of people falling off the cliff, it doesn't just show up in housing. 1 in 8 households struggled to afford food in 2024, according to the Food Bank. That's up from 1 in 10 in 2023 and 1 in 14 in 2022. With those numbers, that's nearly a doubling of the households that are struggling to afford food. Now, I know we talk about grocery inflation, and for those of us who are working jobs that keep us above the poverty line, that can still be difficult. But when you're in that situation of rising rents, in that situation of housing unavailability, and then in that situation of food becoming more and more expensive, it's a wonder to me that anyone stays on the cliff, that anyone's able to keep that footing. And with the food bank, the number of people accessing it is also going through the roof. 25% increase from 5,888 to 73,000 in the last year. These are 30% of these folks are under 18, 30% are on government assistance, and the rest are people working for whom that money just doesn't go as far as it used to. And again, the reason why I started with that story of the cliff and the whirlpool is to put into context what these numbers are. In my mind, when I read these, it's clay and earth sliding off a cliff that people are trying to hold themselves to. And when they do fall off that cliff, as these numbers say that more and more and more people will, there's nothing great waiting for them on the bottom. Any drive around Waterloo region shows that we have an encampment crisis, shows that we have a homelessness crisis. But when we're seeing a 129% increase in chronic homelessness from January 2020 to September 2023, 2,371 people in the region, increase of 28% year over year, these are crazy numbers. And I've spent my career working in shelters and tiny home communities and food programs, and while those spaces are filled with some of the kindest people I've ever met, some of the bravest people I've ever met, it's a hard life when you're doing that. And I won't go too far into the details of homelessness and the challenges, because again, it's miles to Pluto when we think about it. But 70% of people on the street would test positive for an acquired brain injury. That's severe concussion that leads to long-term mental health issues. It's just such a rough life. And the reality is we've allowed it. We've allowed it through our provincial policies, we've allowed it through our municipal policies, and we've allowed it through our federal policies. There's nothing inevitable about this. It's a world we let happen. And when you do fall into the whirlpool, I see it as being made of 3 parts. There's the overwhelmed emergency supports, the shelter systems at capacity, the food programs pushed to the breaking point that mean that when you fall, you can't get caught quickly. Once you fall through those emergency supports, there's the erosion of your overall health. People will run up debt, credit card debt, lines of credit for motels to stay housed a little bit longer. Their physical health will deteriorate after nights in the cold. Their relational health, the people who stood by them, it'll be harder and harder to hold those. And then we provide so few pathways to stability. There's almost no way out of the whirlpool once you're in it. No way back up onto that cliff or onto sturdier ground. And these things cycle and cycle and cycle. The lack of pathways out overwhelms our emergency support. The lack of emergency support means health deteriorates, and the deterioration of health means there's fewer and fewer paths to stability. So, leaving you on this bright note, my questions that I would ask a candidate that came, and the ones I'd like to leave on the table today, are how would you help the people on the cliff? These are questions of housing security and housing affordability, food security, housing construction. What can we do at the provincial level to make this a more affordable and dignified place to live in Ontario? How would you get people out of the whirlpool? For those folks who have been spinning and spinning and spinning for years, to the point where helping them isn't always the fantasy of help that we see with our middle class lens. It can be hard, it can be, messy, it can be incomplete. And what does a provincial response to people who we've let fall into that and stay in that whirlpool for years look like? And to leave with a slight piece of hope as well, I want to know who you guys look up to in this space, right? Who do you see that you can get behind their work and say, there's a lot wrong in here, but this person or this organization gets it right, and if elected, I will help them move their vision forward because I think they have something really meaningful to say. So thank you all so much.
Tony D'Amato Storts. Thank you so much, Tony. Well, we saw our candidates. They were writing, not furiously, but, Furious-esque. As Tony was asking those questions, we're now going to get them to react. They have 4 minutes each. And Tony, thank you. That was like 10 minutes. That was, that was good internal clock, sir. So we're going to start this round of reaction with Liberal candidate for Waterloo, Clayton Moore. Clayton?
Thank you so much. There we go. Can we hear me now? Well, thank you so much for sharing those, all of those remarks. And it really wasn't all that long ago that in Ontario, if you worked hard, if you got a good job, if you saved, you could aspire to own a home. You wouldn't be stuck in poverty. And it is scary to me to see the percentage of people who are spending greater than 50% of their income on rent alone. People can't save up. We're in a scary space right now in this province where it is tougher and tougher for people to even stay on that cliff, let alone stay out of the whirlpool or get out of the whirlpool. Today, that dream of home ownership is is becoming further and further away for more and more people. Last year, 80,000 people in this province experienced homelessness. That is an embarrassment for a province this wealthy and in a country that is this wealthy. And the numbers are getting worse. That is up 25% from just 2 years ago. This isn't because people aren't working hard. This isn't because people aren't trying to improve their situation. It's because folks are just one missed paycheck away, one missed bill from completely changing their lives. Half of Canadians are only $200 away from missing a bill payment. Think about what that means. That might mean missing rent. That might be missing a mortgage payment. That might be completely changing your life. We see it all over the place with 268,000 people on a wait list for affordable housing in Ontario. It's gotten absolutely incredible. And keep in mind, this is families looking to create a future in this province. This is seniors on fixed incomes that are struggling to make ends meet, and these are workers who are just doing their best to survive. Even the people that are lucky enough to save up for a home, this keeps climbing out of reach. Housing keeps getting more and more expensive. We've gotten to a state right now in Ontario where the price of a house is over $250,000 more expensive than it was in 2018. This is becoming challenging, and we're falling into a spiral where everything is getting more expensive. Those that would hope to buy a home in the near future are stuck spending all their money on rent. So they rent for longer. So the price of housing goes up. So they keep renting for longer, which means that the price of the rentals become more competitive, driving up more costs, and you end up with more people stuck in more precarious positions. We got to do something about this. We need to start building. That's why the Ontario Liberal Party is committed to building more homes. We want to make sure that we're driving those costs of actually building homes down. Because did you know that about 25% of a cost of a new house is all stuck up in development charges? Those have come up about 993% over the past 10 years, which fundamentally means that before you even put a shovel in the ground, a house costs $170,000. That's going to be inaccessible for too many people. So the Ontario Liberal Party is going to create the Better Communities Fund to pay that, to make sure that we're incentivizing developers to actually build homes, to actually start addressing this challenge.
Clayton,
On top of that,
just want to let you know, Clayton, 1 minute.
On top of that, we want to make sure that we're actually encouraging people to move. We want to make sure that we're removing the land transfer tax for first-time home buyers, for seniors looking to downsize, so we can get that flywheel working in the right direction, and we need to make sure that we're protecting renters. So like we were talking about, when you're stuck on the cliff, you need resources. So we're going to create a new resource that offers zero-interest loans to people that are looking to just pay their rent. We need to make sure that we're offering people a lifeline when they're just when they're at the end of their wits, because we absolutely need to address this challenge. This is a wealthy province. We can do more to help people. We need to do more to help people. Housing is a place where we need people to feel stability, where they can come home, feel safe, prepare a meal, because housing is at the root of everything we do. The Ontario Liberal Party's housing strategy is based around making sure that everyone has stable, reliable access to housing that can't be pulled away from them just because they're of one bad month, one surprise bill,
Thank
or
you.
one surprise here.
Thank you, Clayton. Now we will hear from Ashlyn Clancy, the Green Party candidate for Kitchener Centre.
Thank you very much. I was a settlement worker for 7 years and a school social worker for 11 years. So I've been in many homes doing home visits, trying to support parents and kids who are struggling with their mental health. And we know that when it comes to attending school and doing exams or trying to get to work, all those things wash away when you don't know what you're going to eat or you don't know where you're going to live. I've seen how hard people have to work when they are on OW and ODSP just to get food and just to try to find affordable housing. And when that housing is threatened, the rug gets pulled out from under people and they can no longer parent. So we do call for an increase of Ontario Works and ODSP. OW has been frozen, ODSP has gone up by a meager amount. It pales in comparison to the amount that the cost of living has gone up. So we have so many living in legislative poverty. We've had a doubling of people use our food banks in, sorry, I need to keep track. I forgot. Sorry, okay, anyway. Yeah, it just doesn't add up. You know, we see the landlord-tenant board full of people who can't pay their rent, and that's why we need rent subsidies. The math is simple. It's so much better, more compassionate, more caring, more effective to keep people housed and ensure that they have enough for a roof and food. And I think all of us here in this room and every person I talk to at the doors wants that, not only for themselves if they're struggling, but for their neighbors. We have 1,400 encampments in Ontario right now, and I live close to Weber and Victoria. We know that those people moved to a managed encampment, and that encampment was full shortly after. We are hemorrhaging people onto the streets. In this region alone, for every affordable house we build, we lose 39 in the private sector. That's why as MPP, I put forward the Keeping People Housed Act. Too many times I've met people who have a bad acting landlord. We have financialized housing. So instead of investing in things like startup businesses or other economies, we're trying to capitalize and squeeze all we can out of low-income renters. To me, that is the worst way, one of the worst ways, elder care, child care. We should not be profiteering and gouging from people who are paying affordable rents. We have, like Tony said, almost a 0% vacancy rate of affordable housing. So when I meet people, I could name 10 right now of big buildings, townhome complexes. They look like a war zone. I walk in there, the carpets are messy, there's empty vacant units all over the place of their neighbors and friends who have been displaced by a bad acting landlord claiming they're going to renovate. And there's no accountability. 4 landlords have paid an average of $5,000 in the last 4 years for illegally evicting people. That is a slap on the wrist. So we need more solutions. We need the rent subsidies. We need the increase of OW and ODSP so people have a roof and food. We know CERB was about $2,000. We need housing solutions to get rid of the red tape that prevents us. 70% of Ontario is zoned for single-family dwellings. Let's make those fourplexes. Add 4 stories like in older neighborhoods, walk-ups. They're cheaper to build. And we have lots of ways we could cheaply build, like using modular homes. We need 6 to 11 stories on some of those major roads. By opening up the zoning, we can build the missing middle instead of just tall and sprawl, which we know is not affordable. We need to keep people housed and fix the landlord-tenant board. Wait times have gone from 1 month to 1 year. And what does that mean? It means if you're a small landlord who isn't getting paid, you're not renting again. And if you're a tenant who's being stressed out, it means you're having a heart attack, you're having a panic attack. I met a gentleman, every time he went to the landlord-tenant board, he got a new N13 the next day, and he had a heart attack. This affects people's health, and there's no accountability for that. And we need to stop our homes being turned into hotels and our hotels being turned into shelters. I don't know what I meant. So this phenomenon of sliding more and more people down the housing continuum, and young people, this generational inequity, being stuck for moving up the continuum. We need to do better. We need to move away from just shelters as a solution, but stable housing that everybody needs to stay healthy and housed.
Thank you, Ashlyn Clancy. What did your timer say?
Not anything.
No, I was going to say. Yeah, started again.
You know what else we need? We need a new government. That's what we need. Yeah. And I just want to start off by saying I want to say thank you to the organizers, because I don't think that it's ever been more important to know who your representatives are, know what drives them, know what motivates them to serve the public. If you're familiar with servant leadership, it's that, when you're putting yourself out there, you're doing that for other people, not for yourself, which is why we need another government. Tony, thank you very much for the presentation. There's been some crossover and there's duplication, but I do want to say three major things. When you are legislating people into poverty in this province, you are showing them that they don't matter. And there is a callousness to how we are treating our most vulnerable in our societies in Ontario. It's like we've come to some sort of social contract that these people don't matter, that they're living in tents, that somehow that this is their fault. This is why Doug Ford has actually brought in legislation to criminalize people who are homeless, who live in tents. There's a $10,000 fine, right, Ashlyn? $10,000. If you are living in a tent, you don't have $10,000. You're going to end up incarcerated. So our plan is, of course, to double the ODSP rates. People will say, you can't afford to do this. Of course we can, because housing is also health care. And when you don't have that stabilizing factor in your society, you pay in the justice system, in the economy, in the incarceration, in healthcare, right? So there are good reasons to ensure that our most vulnerable in society are taken care of, because that social safety net is so broken and intentionally broken. For us as New Democrats, we have a serious plan to it's called Homes Ontario. We want to partner with the not-for-profit sector and the co-op sector, because they know how to build housing. In fact, Tony, your question is, who do I admire in this community? I admire House of Friendship and the Working Center, because regardless of the barriers that are set up in front of them, they stretch those dollars because there's no profit agenda there, right? They are fully engaged in providing the services and the shelter. So without the shelter, it's really hard to back off that cliff or get out of that whirlpool, right? So housing is the stabilizer, and that is why our plan will create 1.5 million homes by 2031. But I can tell you, as the MPP, as the former MPP and now as the candidate, that over the last almost 13 years that I've been serving this community, agency after agency have come to me and said, listen, we have a plan, we have the capital funding, we need some operational funding, we need a partner in government. And that is where the leadership has really failed, our most vulnerable. The other issue is food insecurity. The fact that 1 in 4 users of the food bank in Waterloo region is a child is a point of shame for us, I think, as a community. It impacts health outcomes and the healthcare budget. It impacts educational outcomes and the learning environment. So we're going to be bringing forward a grocery rebate which recognizes that people are hurting and that they need some assistance with the cost of food. But we also have to address greed. greed in our community. The fact that the large grocery corporations are able to price gouge and essentially steal from the people that have no choice but to go shopping there, this needs to be dealt with in a very serious way, and not the Doug Ford way where, he's going to come down there and, give somebody a shake. We need regulations and we need legislation to ensure that big corporations are not essentially bullying the very people in our community. So these are three tangible things that would lift people immediately, but I also want to say, there are a great ability to create good jobs here. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a huge fan of the Working Center as well, is that people want to work, right? It would be shocking for you to learn that there are people who live in the tents by the train station who actually go to work. But they're not going to spend $382 on half a queen-size bed in somebody's basement. So for them, there's some dignity in at least having their own tent. What's my time?
We're over.
I'm over. Oh, thanks,
Okay.
Craig, for the extra time.
Thank you. I'm going to be more vigilant about time, actually. So thank you for all of your answers. Just a reminder that if you would like to ask any questions, we are doing it by written word. And Emily Waitson, who is right there, if you want to flag her down and write down your questions, and then we will have those at the end of all three presentations. If you're online and you're watching this, welcome. Hope you're enjoying yourself. You can email ewaitson, EWAITSON, at WLU.ca. We're going to move on now to the climate crisis. Dr. Kai Reimer-Watts is a recent graduate of from the Community Psychology PhD program at Wilfrid Laurier University, where his research focused largely on supporting social change in response to the climate crisis. Kai has been involved in numerous local groups, including Faith Climate Justice Waterloo Region, which has engaged faith communities of all kinds in moving forward on justice-based climate action. He's also an active member of the more recent local climate action coalition, the Waterloo Region Climate Collaborative, representing over 50 groups locally in the region, which he'll be speaking on behalf of today. Please welcome Dr. Kai Reimer-Watts to the podium, please.
Thank you. I was told I'd have a clicker to move these things. That might be it. Thank you. Okay. So really appreciate the opportunity to be here. As Craig mentioned, I'm speaking on behalf of the Climate Collaborative. It's a nonpartisan coalition of over 50 local groups that are striving to support each other in taking collective climate action and towards more sustainable futures. And I'll just say quickly, this is quite a unique thing to have emerged in our region. These are groups of all different kinds, including anti-poverty groups, and we really strive to recognize the intersections of the climate crisis with so many other issues of concern to our communities. I'm also a new parent. I have a 7-month-old son at home right now with his mom. Thank you. It is both a joyful and nerve-wracking time to be a parent for so many reasons. So I'm speaking today also, I hope, on behalf of our child and the future of young people and future generations who deserve much better than the present realities that are right now being handed down to them. And that, with the right leadership, could change. It's the adults in the room, all of us here and those beyond. It's up to us to really face the major challenges that we have before us, and for that I'm grateful for those who've organized this event and who try to make a difference in our communities each day. Also acknowledging the land that we live and work on as treaty land, and that we are all treaty people. As a collaborative, we're running this election a nonpartisan Vote for Climate campaign. I'm actually going to pull that sign up right now. So this is just a campaign to remind our political leadership in every party that we expect climate action and it's crucial for all of our futures. And we emphasize every party, yet I think the expectation should be greatest for the parties that hold elected office and have the greatest power. That should carry more responsibility for action. So this is a brief excerpt from a book chapter that I co-authored with others. It's only recently I graduated from the program. Feels somewhat surreal. And this chapter was titled In Pursuit of a Practical Utopia, Transitioning Towards Climate Justice. And in this we argue that the climate crisis demonstrates the dreams of our societies of kind of unlimited economic growth and extraction with little care or reciprocity to give back to sustain nature are actually ensuring a living nightmare for the human species. In short, the way that most modern business-as-usual economies are operating, including here in Canada, is causing widespread destruction of the natural world and triggering massive changes in Earth systems that all life depends on, including us. This includes radical shifts in the Earth's climate due to global emissions. In 2023, over 230,000 Canadians were forced to evacuate their homes due to wildfires alone, and we were speaking about homes just a moment ago. This is not even mentioning many other extreme weather events increasingly impacting people and communities across the country. This is a global crisis that will only get much worse without intelligent, informed, and compassionate action. It's a real pressing threat to our societies, and as such, it's very reasonable for us to expect our governments to take this crisis seriously and to support a just and science-based response, moving us towards more sustainable societies that don't, by their nature, wreck the climate. After all, how can our governments possibly be acting in the public interest if they're not taking this major crisis seriously? In this campaign, we emphasize that climate change connects to everything that we care about. This includes connecting, it's not the sole reason, but it connects to rising food prices, to increasing costs of natural disasters, to issues of increased dependency on fossil fuels and unaffordability. There's increasing physical and mental health impacts with extreme events, issues of housing affordability, livable communities, and much more. This is fundamentally a threat to our futures and our children's futures. So how can we possibly not take it seriously? And how can any legitimate government not take this seriously? In our view, this election should be a referendum. It's a snap election. It should be a referendum on Ontario's performance on climate change that should be centered really in every Canadian election moving forward, not as the only issue that matters, but as a crucial big picture reality that connects with everything else. Without being partisan, the reality is, as Seniors for Climate Action now point out, this current sitting government has a shameful record on this that is very well documented. It is ignoring and even promoting climate breakdown with greater investment into fossil fuels. Ontario has no credible climate plan to reduce emissions, no credible climate adaptation plan, no just transition plan. In fact, we've got an ongoing commitment to continue to double down on one of the big sources of this crisis, fossil fuels and environmental harm, prioritizing corporate profit very often over public well-being. In contrast, positive performance from a sitting government, to give a few ideas, would include tangible reductions in fossil fuel use in our energy grid, increasing protection for green space and farmland, supporting cities to build complete neighborhoods within existing boundaries, accessible neighborhoods, increasing investment in public transit, and innovative clean technologies, and of course, public education on these issues that affect all of us and their solutions. Yet what we've seen from this government is largely the opposite. There are many issues that we're facing here in Southern Ontario, critical both for communities and the climate. This includes the future of the Greenbelt, which is under continued pressure from current government speculators and developers to remove protections. Highway expansion, including a proposed Highway 413, meaning more emissions and traffic, instead of supporting alternatives like increased GO service. Increasing fossil fuel dependence and loss of clean energy contracts that Ontario did have. Instead, we're adding more methane gas to the grid, which is absurd and a backward step for the province. Land expropriation in Wilmot Township, sacrificing our food security and actually going against the community's wishes when there are alternatives for industrial development. And changing the provincial policy statement, raising concerns about increased suburban sprawl and reduced environmental protection, instead of taking real climate action. Clearly, this is not moving forward. We can't afford these many steps backward, and we need to be moving far more urgently forward on the actions that we know we need and can do. So by now, I hope you'll agree that climate action is crucial to our community's future well-being. And it can take so many different positive forms, benefiting us all and addressing many other issues we care about, if only all governments would take this crisis seriously and get on board. To support this, our team has developed this nonpartisan Vote for Climate Signs initiative to make a clear public statement here in Waterloo Region, and to not be silent on this, as is too often the case in elections. These come in different designs, from those more directed towards candidates to those making a statement that I'm voting for climate action, pushing this as a key election issue. We do have some available. If anybody would like one afterwards, we'll have those in the lobby. Oh, that jumped forward very quickly. Okay. So in closing, in the face of such a massive threat, and I get emotional saying this. I mean, I've studied this for many years. I've done activism in our communities. I've worked with many of the great local groups that we have to try. I feel like I've actually spent my entire adult life centered around this and the hope of seeing the needle move. We are at an inflection point. We absolutely need action this decade. And government leadership grounded in science and equity is essential. We need governments to help lead our societies towards far more sustainable futures and invest in the solutions that are needed, centering climate justice. I'm highlighting this public symbol here as it happened to be mounted outside this church that we're in by members of Mount Zion not long ago. You may have seen many others raised by faith communities around the region, sharing a commitment to action. And so, it's clear that our communities want action. And if we can step up, surely we can expect our governments with so much power and authority to act in good faith also. So I recognize this is a few questions, but to end, if elected, what are you planning to do while in office to help address the climate crisis and push the governing parties, whoever is running things, into greater action? How will you help ensure that your party's climate action plan actually follows the science for emissions reduction, requiring a 50% reduction by 2030 and alignment with Canada's existing climate commitments? How will you engage residents in our region about potential policy directions for climate action? And if the federal carbon price does get discussed provincially, will you support it? If not, why not? And what would you suggest to replace it, as evidence shows it was actually finally helping to reduce Canada's emissions and give money back to many Canadians, despite how much it's been attacked? And lastly, how will you help avoid vote splitting in key ridings to ensure, because this matters, to ensure that progressive candidates work together to put our communities and country first and to prevent another Ford majority? And this includes, for instance, promoting unity candidates who have the best chance of winning in a given riding. Thank you.
Kai Reimer-Watts. Thank you, Kai, very much. We will now get a reaction from each candidate for 4 minutes. I'm going to set my timer too, Ashlyn. So we're going to start with NDP candidate for Waterloo, Catherine Fife.
Oh, thank you, and Ashlyn's got it here for me. Thank you very much for the presentation. I agree with much of what has been shared. One of the first things that the Ford government did was, rip out charging stations at Go stations. I mean, it's literally a physical thing to rip out paid infrastructure for the green economy. And I do think that us planning for climate change should be the lens that we look at all ministry activities. You also referenced the preserving of farmland. I also want to put this in the context of the current tariff threats that we're experiencing from the United States. One of the largest industries that we have here in Waterloo region is our agricultural and food processing sector. We offer quality in this regard. And if you are concerned about sovereignty and the threats from our southern president, then we should all be united in ensuring that we have the manner in which to support ourselves, to support the quality of our lives, and that includes preserving the existing agricultural land in Ontario. And certainly what we have seen in this regard is that a lack of transparency around our democracy. Which is exactly what's happening in Wilmot right now. As New Democrats, we have proposed a Green New Deal because people are always talking about the barriers to moving to a green economy. So we want to remove those barriers, which means we're meeting people where they are. So if you're a pipe fitter and you work on Line 5 and you're part of the, that sector, we're going to come to that sector in partnership and collaboration to ensure that there are green new jobs so that there's hope, so that there's motivation to move in that regard. Locally, municipalities have really been hindered by the downloading of provincial responsibilities, both financially and in duties and services. We're going to upload some of those services to ensure that local municipalities have the flexibility and the creativity to find local solutions in communities, because federal and provincial governments, they move slow, and there's an urgency here that we share. I do want to say that on the transit and the highways, obviously we prefer that public investment in public transit. We subscribe to the view that the more highways that you build, the more congestion you're going to have, right? It's well documented, it's evidence-based. As a commuter myself on two-way all day go, the room for improvement is vast in that regard. We've been promised two-way all day go for quite some time. To your question around the carbon tax, we do believe that pricing pollution works It does. There also has to be a refocused on conservation, because that's where the smart money is as well. You can't outsource those jobs if you're renovating your home to make it more energy efficient. These are good jobs. They stay in our community, and they reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So now that actually Trump has said that the Paris Accord is dead, now we as a province and as a country need to refocus on making sure our economy is aligned with those climate change goals, so that we are sustainable and that we are resilient and that we are tariff-proofing our province. Thank you.
Thank you. We are now going to Clayton Moore. Yeah, I'm going backwards from the way. Anyway, I've got a system.
Great system.
So it all
Perfect.
works.
So
Clayton Moore.
let's say the same simply. Climate change is the largest existential threat that currently faces our planet. And addressing climate change can't be boiled down to a single initiative. It cannot be boiled down to a catchy slogan, something that we can put in headlines, or a one-off investment. It's about building a province where sustainability is interwoven into absolutely every single thing we do. From the way we power our grid, to the way we build our homes, to the way that we protect our land and water. Because the reality is, climate change is already here. It's already hitting Ontario hard. Deforestation in southern Ontario has more than doubled since 2009. Our forests act as natural carbon sinks. They help protect biodiversity, and they're disappearing at an alarming rate. All of this means that by 2050, we should expect to see average temperatures increasing by 3.2 degrees Celsius, and that is incredibly alarming. Because that doesn't just mean hotter summers. It's going to mean more extreme weather events, it's going to mean more flooding, and it's going to mean more crop failures. It's going to put more stress on our healthcare system. This isn't just an environmental crisis. This is going to hurt our economy. It's estimated that by this year, climate change is going to decrease Canada's GDP by $25 billion. This isn't just an environmental issue. It's an economic issue, it's a social issue, it's a health issue. And it requires tackling with an all-encompassing plan. First, we need to double down on clean energy. I can remember back in 2014, when under a Liberal government, we banned coal-fired plants. That made a huge difference in people's health care. That made a huge difference in our air. And we don't have smog days anymore in Ontario because we had the political capital, we had the political will to make a big difference that was the right thing to do. It was an ambitious plan, and now we got to go further. We need to make sure that we're doubling down on renewable energy, and then we need to look at nuclear as a major component of that. Right now, nuclear is one of the most effective ways of decarbonizing our grid. Today, nuclear power accounts for 55% of low-carbon electricity here in Ontario. It has been the backbone of our clean energy mix for decades, and we should be expanding on it, not running away from it. Energy is only going to be part of the solution here. We also need to take a look at how we're building. Ontario's housing crisis and environmental crisis go hand in hand. Sprawling developments have been eating up forests and farmland and forcing people into long commutes that contribute to emissions. We are losing 300 acres of farmland every single day to developments. The answer here is clear. We got to build smarter. We need denser, more transit-oriented development that better connects our communities. It's going to be meaning using sustainable building materials. It means ensuring that the 1.5 million homes we need to build here in Ontario aren't just going to put a roof over people's head. They're actually going to help us transition to a greener future. And I cannot stress the importance enough of protecting our natural spaces. Our forests, wetlands, and our greenbelt aren't just a nice to have. They are absolutely essential in our fight against climate change. They store carbon, they protect against flooding, and they protect biodiversity. And Doug Ford has spent his time in office weakening protections and trying to bulldoze over the Greenbelt and build the Highway 413 without any environmental protections. A real climate plan here isn't just about one signature initiative, it's about making every single decision we make in Ontario about building towards a cleaner, more sustainable future. Because the cost of inaction here is too expensive. We cannot delay in Ontario, and Ontario needs to be a world leader in the fight against climate change.
Thank you, Clayton. And now finally, we hear from Ashlyn Clancy, the Green Party candidate for Kitchener Centre.
Thank you, Craig. I'm here today because Doug Ford has done such a crap job when it comes to climate. I remember that day watching on the news a wind turbine being ripped down. And as a mom, I can put my kids to bed on time, not usually, but get them to eat broccoli. But if they don't have a place to live and they don't have a livable planet, what have we really accomplished? And we have 7 teenagers taking the Ford government to court because they have no climate plan. So since he was elected, he canceled those 750 renewable energy projects, and we face an insecure energy future. And we now run our gas plants 24/7, and we're looking at building new gas plants. This blows my mind. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that there is money corrupting politics. Those companies, Enbridge is one I will just mention, they meet with the government on a regular basis. The government intervened in the Ontario Energy Board's decision to stop having ratepayers just have to pay for new gas infrastructure. Let's put all the energy on a level playing field. Renewables are cheaper now. They're cost competitive. So even the IESO says new nuclear is double the price, new gas is double the price. Wind, solar, battery, and water is cheaper by far, by a country mile, and we need to cut the red tape to make these renewable energy investments possible. So we need to get our grid clean again because it has only become dirtier under this government, and to do that, we need to hold this government accountable for the way oil and gas greed and the subsidies we provide as citizens to oil and gas companies is a problem in our economy. Not only that, but we see so much misinformation and disinformation in government. So it's our job as opposition or government to make sure we're being truthful. We need that fairness. We need to do it in a fair way, though. We can't transition all of our economy without thinking of folks who are living on a low income. Not everybody can afford, a new heat pump. So that's why the Greens believe we will give free heat pumps to people with a lower income. That's happening in provinces all across the country. And we'll give free interest loans to people to invest in a heat pump. A lot of people in government don't even know what a heat pump is. So we have a lot of work to do to build this industry. The green industry is $1.8 trillion, and Ontario is being left behind because we're not part of this new transition. We also need to protect ourselves from the harmful weather that's coming. We saw in Toronto a flood that lasted 3 hours, cost $4 billion. That's $1.3 billion per hour in water damage. Why? Because we're not prepared. We hold this government accountable on a regular basis to be prepared for fires, to be prepared for floods, and that's why Greens will support homeowners and support cities in adapting to making sure they're flood-proof and making sure that we have money for municipalities to adjust to these extreme weather. We need to protect our places. This government, in our own region, aside from Wilmot, expanded our countryside line by 6,400 acres. That's almost the size of the Greenbelt. And so that causes speculation. Farmers can't get into farming because our farmland is being bought up by speculators. So we are eroding those small middle farmers that grow all the crops of fruits and vegetables that we need. So we aim to create a food belt to protect that farmland. We will not pave over our watershed and wetlands. We will cancel the 413, and that's how we can use that money to invest in proper transit and retrofits to our cities to make sure we can hit that target.
Thank you, Ashlyn. Just a reminder that we are taking written questions this evening. I see some people have availed themselves of we'll call them an usher, I guess, maybe. Yeah, sure. Question taker. So if you do have a question, we do have cards to fill out, and you can just motion over here and they will see that you want to write down a question. And online, if you're watching online, remember if you'd like to ask a question, to email ewaitson@wlu.ca. Waitson is Waitson. We're going to move on now to the third and final segment of the evening, healthcare. And we are going to hear from Dr. Michael Lowry. Dr. Lowry is a retired physician from Cambridge with over 40 years' experience. He was chief of staff at Cambridge Memorial Hospital for 4 years and was also the head of the hospital's Medical and Staff Association for 4 years. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Michael Lowry.
Thank you, Craig. Panelists, candidates, thank you for offering yourself for public service and entering into this conversation. And thank you to all of you who are interested in the political process and want to have some crucial conversations. This is a great opportunity to do that. I wanted to do a disclaimer, and the disclaimer is I'm not affiliated with any political party. I have voted every color at different times in my career. So I'm not saying that my vote's up for sale, but I'm really impressed by the clarity and the way that you folks are addressing those issues. As a physician and talking about health and how that's going to impact in our future, we want to look at what's happening in Ontario with healthcare in Ontario, and that's basically the thrust of what I want to present to you tonight. I want to start off by saying that Medicare is or could be the crown jewel of our nation. Other countries do look at us and wonder how we get it done and how we manage. We look south of the border to their healthcare system and say they've got the best and the worst, and it depends on what kind of HMO you've got and what your insurance coverage is. So our Medicare, I think, is an element of our society that we can be very proud of. We basically accumulated where we are now by the Canada Health Act, which was adopted in 1984 by federal legislation. And it espoused a publicly funded health insurance commonly called Medicare, and sets out the primary objective of our Canadian healthcare policy. And these are the 5 key principles of Medicare. Portability, that can be carried from province to province. Accessibility, that you can get the kind of health services that you need regardless of where you are or who you are. Universality, that it applies to everyone, regardless of where you live or what your background is or what your health has been in the past. It is comprehensive. It covers all of the major disciplines and things that you might encounter along the way, and it is publicly administered. So you have elected people accountable and responsible to you to incorporate this system. Now, I wanted to introduce something that was unique to Canada, and it's called CIHI, C-I-H-I. That's the Canadian Institute for Health Information. And it is a not-for-profit organization that analyzes the data and provides a lot of the information that I'm going to be sharing with you tonight about our health system in Canada and in particular in Ontario. CIHI is a nonprofit organization and it provides essential information and compares that to where we have been in the past and where we might go in the future. And it talks about health system performance in the entire population across Canada. Now, what I'm holding up here now analyzes some of the economics of this, and we'll get into some of the providers and issues, but you can see public hospital funding per person. So all of the money that goes into our public hospitals is broken down in a per capita way, and it's probably a good idea for lots of funding to go here. Sadly, Ontario comes in 10th place, 10 out of 10, and even below the provincial average. This data is from 2022. Here is an analysis of public health care funding per person. So this is not hospital-based, this is community-based. And once again, Ontario comes in a rather sad 10th place. I now want to deal with some of the key issues that I think we are struggling with. And these numbers are somewhat alarming. 2.5 million Ontarians do not have a doctor. So how do they get their care? Well, they get their care episodically by going perhaps to emergency departments or urgent care clinics. They don't have an affiliation with a consistent system. They get it where they can. And one of the reasons for that, if you've ever had to try to engage a new doctor, is doctors only can handle a certain capacity, and when they reach that limit, they say, "I'm sorry, I cannot take any more patients." So there are 2.5 million Ontarians. We're going to be dealing with unplanned closures of emergency departments and urgent care clinics. There are 163 emergency departments in Ontario. And in the year 2024, 1 in 5 of those hospitals with an emergency room or urgent care clinic had unplanned closures. In other words, they shut down. They could not provide service. You had to go to the next hospital or the next town. Many of these were in smaller communities, but we have heard of that impacting even in some of the larger centers. I'd like to just talk for a moment about quality indicators as to what we would like our healthcare system to do. And I think what we would like it to do is to guarantee accessibility and good outcomes, and to measure what those outcomes are. And that's a responsibility of our public hospitals and our Ministry of Health, analyzing and looking at data as to what we can do better. We also will spend a bit of time talking about key players in the system. And the top and bottom line of what my presentation is that we need more physicians, we need more nurse practitioners and nurses. The Ontario Medical Association, you'll be seeing some acronyms here. I'll try to introduce them to you as best we can. But you heard that 2.5 million figure of the Ontarians without a family doctor. They're estimating that there will be 4.4 million next year. The Ontario Nurses Association is also the professional organization for our nurses. And sadly, we have in Ontario the worst ratio of nurses to population. Again, these are numbers that you do crunch, but there are 651 nurses, RNs that is, per 100,000 population. Ontario is in 10th place. Now, some of those duties can be accomplished by others, but every province does try to build in those efficiencies, and we still come in a poor last place. If we are to look at sort of a very simple snap solution, we need to train more and recruit more family doctors and nurses. Of the hospitals that I mentioned that had unplanned closures and shutdowns, many of them were in rural Ontario. I'll just quickly go through the list, but Clinton, Chesley, Durham, Walkerton, Wingham and District, St. Mary's Memorial Hospital, that's in St. Mary's, not our St. Mary in Kitchener, Seaforth, Glengarry, Almonte, and Louise Marshall in Mount Forest. Due to staff shortages, they have had to close their doors and readjust, not permanently, but not providing the 24/7 service that needs to happen. So if we have 2.5 million Ontarians without a family doctor, what are some of the other alternatives? Well, there are many different ways of providing health care, and it doesn't necessarily have to involve a physician, but it does need health professionals to run that and to provide a clinic that does make sense. I've mentioned the nursing shortage. I just want to talk about physician supply, and I think I've had the privilege and the opportunity to gain admission to a medical school, and that's a really hard thing to do, and it's getting harder and harder. Many of our young, brilliant students have to go abroad to study, but the pipeline that provides doctors is controlled by the government, and they discuss with I think there are now 15 medical schools in Canada, they decide on the enrollment and the numbers. And it's sort of almost a lottery to get in. And I think we need to kind of look at that when we address the shortage, because one natural solution is to train more of our own people, but a lot of our own people go abroad to get their medical degrees. The doctor that took over my practice, very brilliant student, couldn't get into a Canadian medical school, and so he went to England and did very well and came back and qualified. Interestingly, when he did return to Canada, he had to do the 3-month mandatory course for international medical grads. He had to learn about Ontario culture, and he had to prove proficiency in English. More wasted money. So, we're all concerned about quality, and there are organizations that want to make sure that the doctor that serves you, the health professional that serves you, meets the standards and is keeping up to date and providing a quality service. So the major organization that monitors doctors is the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario. So they take care of discipline, of complaints, and of licensing. The Ontario Medical Association is our professional association. It is not a union, but it does negotiate fees with the provincial government. The Ontario Nurses Association, and then allied health professionals also have their college, such as physiotherapists, occupational therapists, etc. I've mentioned CIHI, the Canadian Institute for Health Information, that provides and analyzes numbers and publishes these. The charts of the funding for hospitals and for healthcare in the various provinces was prepared by CIHI. There's also an organization called Accreditation Canada, which goes to hospitals and nursing homes and checks all aspects of their operations to make sure that they are governed properly and they are following best practices in all areas. And when an accreditation occurs, top grades give 3 years for the next assessment to take place. Where improvements are necessary, they are prescribed, and it's up to the hospital board and hospital administration to enact those. The other supervisor and organizing structure for doctors is the Ministry of Health for Ontario. Here are my questions for the candidates. What changes would you make to ensure that every citizen in Ontario has access to a family physician or nurse practitioner, a primary care provider? How might new technologies such as AI and health information systems improve access to healthcare for those without a healthcare professional? And would you support expansion of a 2-tier system in which people could opt to pay for healthcare services and not have to wait in line? That is what some of the private clinics that we have seen springing up are doing. By the way, it's illegal to charge for healthcare in Ontario, but there are ways around that by offering services that aren't covered but can be upsold. So I think the bottom line is we have 2.5 million people that don't even have a doctor, and that, I think, is a crisis and should be corrected. Those services need to be provided. Thank you.
Dr. Lowry, thank you very much. And now we will call on reaction from the candidates. And we will start this time, and she knows it, with Ashlyn Clancy. She's already mic ready.
I am surrounded by mics. Mike's trying to make worse. My mom was a nurse for 30 years, and she didn't leave by choice. She was shoved out from grueling schedules, moving her from labor and delivery, where she worked her whole career, into parts of the hospital she'd never worked before, and she was worried she was going to cause harm. This is what we're doing to healthcare professionals right now, and that's why we have a shortage of nurses, doctors, and allied health professionals. The ratios are too high, the administrative burden is oppressive, and so people don't end up with a healthy work-life balance. It makes the job a career people love, a career people are passionate to pursue, unlivable. And that's why it's important that we address some of the challenges that we talked about today. Thank you for that. I went to our medical family medicine school in downtown Kitchener. I spoke to the students. 50% of those students are not going into family medicine. So we can fill all the seats we want, but if people aren't going to do the jobs that we want them and need them to do because of the workplace conditions, we are no further ahead. It is important that, yes, we use AI, but we fund and support doctors with the administration and cut some of those ridiculous barriers. We're sending faxes back and forth to multiple pharmacies, to multiple specialists. OMA says centralize those lists. Make it electronic. Make it efficient. We can do so much by making those administrative costs go away. Let's make sure doctors have a place to live. They are not going to settle in Kitchener if they can't afford to live in Kitchener. They don't have health care or child care in Kitchener. Health care. They might have their own health care. But we need to be sure that they have what they need to survive in our communities. Nurses need good ratios. This Bill 124, I was affected by it. All healthcare professionals were. We said, you are our COVID hero, and I am mandating a 1% increase on your salary. So we have to hold this government accountable for the HR problems that we have right now. So many qualified nurses leaving the profession and not working in this field. Definitely, we have to stop the privatization. We are spending more and getting less. I debated the healthcare budget, and I said to Sylvia Jones, we are last. She said, well, aren't we efficient? I didn't have one person come to my office in the past year and say, wow, what an efficient healthcare system we have. We have people coming to us because their loved ones are in hallways, because nurses are run off their feet and our hospitals are over capacity. We do need this hospital. We have one in Waterloo, but we need to keep funding the progress. Right now, we're at a stalemate. I will fight at the Ontario legislature to make sure that we continue to build this hospital in the region that serves over 1 million people right now, let alone with the growth in population we anticipate. So we need to do more to improve our hospitals, to fund rural hospitals and make sure they can keep their doors open. We need this team-based care so that doctors aren't on their own. Doctors are one part of a bicycle wheel with many spokes. As a social worker, I know there's so much. Even the doctors were saying to me, what do I do when somebody needs housing and food? Right? They feel the weight of the gaps in our society, and that's where that team-based care can really help. So we will invest in team-based care. And finally, we need to work on prevention. Too often, it's Band-Aid after Band-Aid after Band-Aid. And the prevention, thank you. And the government breaks it and looks at privatization to fix that. Our ERs are being used as warming centers. We see 25% increases in cold months of people coming to emergency rooms. Let's take the pressure off emergency rooms, make sure people have a roof and food, and properly fund our not-for-profit sector that deal with mental health and addictions. Let them do the work they do and pay the people that do that work. Care for the people who care for us.
Thank you, Ashley. Now we will hear from Catherine Fife.
Okay, good. So at the very heart of the issue that we're facing right now in Ontario is that we have a healthcare human resources crisis, without a doubt. And, there's been a successive history that has diminished some of the supports that we have seen for those workers in those hospitals, acute care, if you will. But what happened with Bill 124 is that the government of Ontario brought in an unconstitutional piece of legislation which held people down who were doing the good work in our healthcare system, those public servants. So what we have to do is we need to reestablish some trust and some respect back into those professions, and the provincial government should be leading the way. We cannot recruit people into a broken system. So there's a few steps that we must take. Our plan will be focusing on family health teams. We do believe very strongly in community-based healthcare. There are 1,300 foreign-trained doctors and medical professionals right now in Ontario who need that support to continue that pathway back into the healthcare system. There's no reason why the concierge at my building in Toronto, who's a renal specialist, should not be working in a hospital. So we have been really pushing the government in this regard. Obviously, increasing residency spots, Dr. Laurie, we must do that. That is within our control. If you were serious about supporting public health in Ontario, it would be one of the very first things that you did. But unfortunately, we are dealing with a government right now, under the Ford government, who are actively undermining our public health care system by creating those loopholes that Dr. Laurie mentioned, by increasing the private clinics. They call this innovation, right? They've created a crisis in the public health care system, and then they've created this parallel system, which is cannibalizing our public health care system. So we are seeing doctors and nurses move into private clinics because our public healthcare system is in such chaos, with everybody working short all the time. So you can't compete, right? Last year alone, we spent $1.5 billion just on agency nurses. We have a family member who works at Grand River Hospital, could never get full-time work as a nurse. However, she was working alongside agency nurses who are making 3 times as much as she was. This is fundamentally unfair. It is by design. It needs to stop. But the leadership at the provincial level needs to be part of that equation. I want to talk about home care and the importance of home care in the healthcare continuum. People do not want to go to a hospital, right? They do not want to go to an emergency room. They want to make sure that they stay in their homes as long as possible. We need to strengthen the home care system in this province, which has also been aggressively privatized. And also, the people that work in that system are primarily women and primarily racialized. They need to be treated with respect because they are doing important work. The Financial Accountability Officer of Ontario has said and done a financial analysis of where the money is going in the province of Ontario. He has declared that if we continue on this pathway, looking at the numbers that were shared, it is a system that is being designed right now to fail. We are literally fighting for public health care, those core values that we've said that we want in this province. We've been working very closely with the Ontario Medical Association. The administrative burden is low-hanging fruit that we can do something right now about, right? Doctors want to spend time with patients. They don't want to do 13 hours of paperwork every single week. And finally, the social infrastructure to keep people healthy. We must refocus on this. There's a hospital in Toronto that is building housing attached to it. So because they are seeing the same people over and over again. There's so much work to be done, but thank you very much for your time on that.
Thank you. And now we will hear from Clayton Moore.
Well, let's be clear here. When you or a loved one gets sick, you should be able to rely on Ontario's healthcare system. And we got a system that's failing for way too many people. We've heard this number a couple of times, but I do want to reiterate it. It's 2.5 million people without a family doctor in Ontario. That's the size of the city of Toronto. A whole Toronto is worth of people that do not have access to a family doctor. You probably know one of them. I am one of them. So what that means is that we've got people who should be getting treatments in clinics that are being forced into ERs and clogging up our emergency rooms for longer and longer. It is not uncommon to go to an emergency room and have to wait for 15 hours to be seen by a doctor. That is unreasonable. That is a failure of our healthcare system. Doug Ford has been systemically underfunding and undermining healthcare because he wants to. This is a deliberate choice. This isn't just mismanagement. This is an active plan so that in a few years he can come back to us and say, see, public healthcare isn't working. We need to privatize this. You asked us, should we be privatizing healthcare? Hell no, we should not be privatizing healthcare. Healthcare is about protecting people when they need support. 2.5 million people do not have a family doctor. That is a crisis. And we're shoveling people out of this profession by the droves, by telling people that have given their lives to helping people when they need it most, nurses, PSWs, that you're only entitled to a 1% raise every year. Why are they going to stick around? The answer is, they don't. They leave the country, they leave the province, and we trained them. This is incredibly damaging for our future. We need to do something to solve this. This is going to be our #1 priority as a Liberal government. We need to invest $3.1 billion into recruiting, retaining, and integrating over 3,000 doctors into our healthcare system. Because this is crisis mode now. We need to start by stopping the bleed, and then we need to make sure that we're planning for the future. Some of the lowest hanging fruit we've already talked about here today. Integrating over 1,200 foreign-trained doctors who are qualified and ready to work to actually take on new patients. They need to get into the system as quickly as possible. But we need to make sure that we are never put in a situation like this again. So we're going to start 2 new medical schools in Ontario to make sure that we're training and educating new doctors in here so that we are never placed in this position again. This is a crisis mode, and this is by design. We need to make sure that every single person in Ontario has access to a family doctor. That's going to clear up ERs so that we can actually make sure that we are protecting people when they need it most. So Doug Ford's approach here has been to cut, it's been to underfund, and it's been to privatize. I think public health care is worth fighting for. Public health care has been here for us. It has been the pride and envy of Canada around the world, and we are at a crossroads right now. We need to make a decision, an active decision, every day to fight for it. That's why the Ontario Liberal Party is based around fighting for you. You deserve a family doctor. You deserve to be healthy. You deserve access to the support you need when you need it. We know that we've got an aging population. We know that this problem is going to get a heck of a lot worse before it gets better. So we need to make major investments today and make sure that we're planning for the future to ensure that this never happens again. And Ontarians can be rest assured that they're going to be taken care of when they need it most.
Thank you, Clayton. That concludes the presentations. We are now going to take some questions from the audience. Over the course of the evening, some questions have been submitted from the floor. And Emily has been grouping them, and she has them. The envelope, please. I feel like I'm at the Oscars. We're going to try and get through as many of these as possible. We may not get to all of them, and my apologies in advance. We want to be respectful of your time. We want to be respectful of the candidates' time. But we'll start asking these questions so we get to them right away. What's going to happen is the candidates will have a chance to a 2-minute answer to these questions. And then after we're done that, we're going to give them 2 minutes at the end to do some closing statements as well. So we're going to do the first question now, and that is, what's one point of, thank you for the great penmanship, by the way. It's very easy to read. I appreciate this. What's one point of leverage that provincial governments can use that's different to other levels of government and when addressing all of these issues? We'll start with Clayton Moore on that question.
One point of leverage I think is really interesting. I mean, the Ontario government, fundamentally, governments work hard for people. We have access to more resources, and we have access to making strong decisions. At the end of the day, governments can make things happen when they put their minds to it. Again, I want to come back to the example of shutting down coal plants in Ontario. Governments can make massive decisions when they take the political risks to actually do them. We're not missing leverage at this point. We're missing willpower because Doug Ford isn't actively trying to fight for you. He wants to make sure that he's empowering and enriching a couple of wealthy, well-connected insiders. We don't have an issue of leverage right now in this province. We have an issue of a government that doesn't want to solve your problems. We have an issue of a government that plans to enrich some of the richest amongst us, wants to see those gaps increase. I think that's wrong. Government should be about fighting for people, for helping ordinary people and lifting them up. Education can be a clear pathway to the middle class. So why are we underfunding it? Healthcare is crucial to making sure that you can actually show up to work and make a living. So why are we selling it off? Governments can make decisions when they need to. This government has shown that they don't want to. So at this point, the Ontario Liberal Party is ready to step up and be a government that's going to fight for you, fight for the middle class, fight for ordinary people.
Thank you. And now we will go to Ashlyn Clancy. Same question, just a reminder. What's one point of leverage that provincial government can use that's different to other levels of government when addressing all of these issues?
I think it's a matter of priorities. You know, I think unfortunately our political system has come down to easy to remember taglines. It's a sad moment when I can say axe the tax, even though, you know, it makes me kind of puke in my mouth a little bit all the time. Yeah, we need more than that. I think we ought to demand more than that from our government. So much money has been wasted on highways, having close access to alcohol. But that's the priority of this government. You know, our provincial level of government, I mean, we try to fight for democracy. We put forward good solutions. As your MPP, before being a Green candidate, was to build that collaboration across party lines, try to move forward with solutions. But we have seen an erosion of democracy. You know, we had bills going past us in a matter of an hour versus a month. No committee, no debate. And so we need to demand more of our provincial government, that they have a proper democracy, that they use our resources properly, and we have to be sure that we build the political will in society to insist that they do that. We saw what happened with the Greenbelt. There was a process, and our opposition parties fought to make sure that they follow a good process, a fair process, instead of a corrupt process that makes 15 people $8.3 billion richer. And that's the RCMP investigation that's happening right now. So we still have courts, we still have judges, we still have the rule of law, but we need a strong opposition as well to push them to ensure that they're being fair, that they're following the rules, and we need to raise the alarm with media of many stripes to make sure that we call out some of the bad acting and the false priorities, because people don't come to my office asking for convenient alcohol. They come asking for proper health care. So let's demand that of them.
Thank you, Ashlyn. Same question to Catherine Fife. Would you like me to repeat the question, or? Okay.
So one of the key leverage points that the provincial government has is on procurement. Government is a major buyer of services and goods across the province. And I'll just give you this one stat. In April 2024, the provincial government estimated that about $1 billion would be awarded to Ontario businesses each year, but the Chamber pointed out that that is a small portion of the $29 billion that the Ontario public sector spends annually on procurement of goods and services. Now, these goods and services are healthcare services. They are green economy services. They're goods that we need to actually create subway trains, for instance. This government didn't give the contract to refurb our subway trains to Thunder Bay. They gave it to a European country. They didn't, give the contracts to modernize Ontario Place, our place, Ontario Place. They gave it to a European spa at a price tag of $2.2 billion to you. Every taxpayer in the province of Ontario is going to have to spend $400 to subsidize a European spa. Like Ashlyn, nobody has come into my office in the last 13 years and demanded a spa. They want health care. They want housing. They want education. These are our core values. In 2021, I brought forward a piece of legislation to diversify and create an Made in Ontario procurement strategy because we learned important lessons during the pandemic. We didn't have enough medical supplies to take care of ourselves. If we continue to pave over 319 acres of farmland every single day in Ontario, we won't have enough food to feed ourselves. And as I pointed out, this is an issue of sovereignty. So there are so many things that the Ontario government can do. They should start by doing their job, and they should start by showing up to these damn debates because I'm getting tired of it.
Thank you, Catherine. The next question is, how will you and your party address the needs of long-term care patients who are being shortchanged in our region? We will begin with Catherine Fife on this question.
I love this topic. Again, lessons that were learned during the pandemic, right? We need patient-to-patient nursing and patient ratios. 4 hours, we've been fighting for this for almost a decade. People who end up in long-term care, listen, a lot of people don't want to get there. They want to stay in their own homes. They want quality home care. They want to be sure that they're getting the medical attention that they need in their own homes. Long-term care, when we saw over 4,000 seniors die during the pandemic, that's when a light was shone on how broken this for-profit, corporate model of long-term care is, right? The Canadian Army went into some of those homes and they have PTSD based on what they saw. Seniors should be treated with respect in the province of Ontario. They should not die by neglect in the very system that is designed to care for them. So seniors, the entire senior continuum goes to housing and community, because we also know that isolation and loneliness kills. We need to ensure that people who need alternative level care, who are now in our hospitals because they're waiting for long-term care, are not shipped 150 kilometers out of their community as Bill 7 proposes. It's an unethical piece of legislation, quite honestly. And if we are elected, and as the MPP, I will make sure that the Till Death Do Us Part legislation, which keeps seniors together in long-term care, we shouldn't be separating couples of 30, 40, or 50 years. It's completely disrespectful. Refocus our attention on removing the profit agenda from long-term care and ensure that people are getting quality care in those institutions and in those homes.
Thank you, Catherine. We'll now hear from, I'm just making it up. No, I'm not. I've got this is my little thing here. Clayton Moores.
We have to make sure that we're protecting seniors at home and in long-term care. One of the things that's really shocked me is how difficult it can be to get into long-term care close to where you lived. Because of that, more and more seniors are delaying this time and time again. And it's sad to see. You end up trying to separate somebody from their bridge group that they've been working with, or they've been playing with for 50 years, just because they can't get access in here. So that means that people are taking risks at home. I can remember my grandmother out in Vancouver, who we came in one day to find her on halfway up the stairs on a ladder trying to change the light bulb because we were busy. It's because she wanted to stay in her home. That's scary. We are neglecting seniors all over the place, from housing to healthcare. These are people that absolutely need us, that have educated us, that have paid their dues. They have done so much for all of us, and we are neglecting them time and time again. COVID showed that in spades. Where the people are neglected, people are stuck waiting for hours to see nurses time and time again. So they might only see a single nurse once, maybe twice a day. These are people that might not be able to bathe themselves. These are people that cannot take care of themselves when they end up in long-term care. We need to be doing better by seniors, by investing seriously in long-term care and investing seriously in healthcare. It's going to boost our supply of PSWs and of registered nurses, of folks that are here to actually support us, are actually there to support folks that are retired. We need to do so much work in here because these are people that need us. They need support. And at the end of the day, neglecting them isn't the answer. We need to make sure that we've got a capacity issue, that we're funding healthcare appropriately to make sure that we've got nurses to actually support people more than just for 20 minutes a day. They should get constant visits to make sure that they're okay, social, and doing well in their homes, in their communities.
Thank you, Clayton. And now we'll hear from Ashlyn Clancy.
Yeah, I've been visiting a lot of retirement homes and long-term care homes. What I hear is that our not-for-profit sector, it can't grow. You know, the demands right now is shovel-ready, and you get a lot of taxpayer dollars. Well, not-for-profits can't bake sell enough to buy land in Kitchener-Waterloo. So Sunnyside is our not-for-profit long-term care home, and you get in there because you've had an emergency. It's really awful to think that this is your experience. Instead of having a smooth transition, you have to wait for your loved one or yourselves to have an emergency, be in a hallway in order to get into an affordable long-term care home. It's a terrible way to make profits, and there's a lot of gouging. I don't know if anybody in here knows the rates that people pay for retirement living, and for a lot of those for-profit long-term care homes, it's a lot of money. So people's whole livelihoods and they are worried. I think our seniors are worried about the amount that it costs. So it's important that we really get the balance back to make sure, I mean, right now the balance is way off kilter, and all of our taxpayer dollars are going into building for-profit care home beds. We need to ensure too that we respect those professionals. Not only do PSWs in most cities across Ontario not even make a living wage. That means the amount you need for a roof and food, not to mention a vacation or anything else, but that you have enough to live. PSWs are not getting paid a living wage, and all the staff in those systems are not getting the pay increases they deserve for the recreation degrees they have and the careers that they've built their life around. So not only do we need to re-look at the way we fund things, we need to respectfully pay our paraprofessionals, and we do need to look at alternative level of care. Too many people are waiting in the hallways of hospitals or falsely put into long-term care because they need more than that 4 hours.
Thank you very much. Now you hold on to the mic. This one is pretty easy. I mean, I think could be a yes or no answer, but that'll be, maybe we could save some time here. Will you and your party commit to reversing the decision to close supervised consumption sites?
We are the party so far that has come out to say that we will keep safe consumption sites. We don't make decisions based on fear, based on morality, high grounds. We don't make it based on politics. We make it based on data. And all the data right now shows that safe consumption sites save lives. Right now, don't get me wrong, I appreciate the $5 million that Kitchener got in the Heart Hubs. We've gone from $1 million that was spent at the Sanguine site on Duke Street. And if anyone goes there, it is a health clinic. It's not this or that. It is all the healthcare tools that we need to deal with opioid addiction. So if you go into that clinic, you feel the love, you feel the respect, and the lack of stigma. The number one barrier to getting treatment for an addiction or mental health issue is stigma. People have zero self-worth. That's what they get in those sites. Meet people where they're at. If I was a social worker who worked with kids who dropped out of school, and I didn't meet kids where they're at, I expected them to come to school and put their head down, I would be an utter failure. And that's what we're looking at right now. We're looking at mass casualties. We have Guelph spending $500,000 on property tax dollars to ensure that we have enough paramedics to respond when those sites close. So yes, I will be supportive and outspoken that harm reduction is the answer. It's data-driven and proven. This government is getting private investigators to snoop around for evidence that these things are drug dens. This is not okay, and we need to be steadfast. And I had one more thing to say. Finally, we are going to see outbreaks of HIV, AIDS, and hepatitis C. Those clean needle programs, people go to give a dirty needle because they get a clean needle. And the area around a Dirk Street, it gets cleaned up by peer support workers, so there aren't needles near there. I know that they can be elsewhere, but heaven forbid, this is a big cost in our healthcare system that is completely unnecessary, and EMS and emergency rooms will be overwhelmed.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Catherine Fife.
So as a party, we believe in community-based healthcare. We fought the removal of the funding for the safe consumption sites. Like Ashlyn, we also are interested and supportive of the heart hubs, waiting to see actually how this plays itself out in our communities. I, as well as like Ashlyn, have toured, have seen firsthand the compassion, the healthcare, the support that is provided. I do want to say, I think that when the Ford government, decided that this was a hot button issue at Queen's Park, you would not believe the negative, derisive, disdainful language that they use to talk about people who suffer from mental health issues and addiction issues. There is this philosophy, I think, in that at the legislature that, people can just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Well, they can't if they don't have boots, right? And this was gaslighting 101. And it's very upsetting to watch how a premier of the province can talk about another human being with such disdain and hatred. When I've toured with Sanguine, for instance, and you meet people where they are, there's a lot of damage that has happened to so many people in our community. When we were talking earlier about brain injuries that folks have experienced, some of the women that I've spoken with are actually victims of domestic violence and intimate partner violence, and they've suffered concussions because they were beaten. And therefore, then they then became addicted to certain substances. We need to meet people with compassion and in our community. We shouldn't be ostracizing them and criminalizing them.
Thank you. And finally, Clayton Moore.
I can keep this answer brief. Yeah, I would support overturning. It is the right thing to do. Supervised consumption sites mean that it is safer for people to get the support that they need. They are a community resource that makes life better for people. It protects people when they need it most, and it provides care when and where they need it. It's the right thing for this community. I can't speak for everywhere. I can't speak for my entire party, but I would support reopening our supervised consumption sites.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. There are some great questions here. I was reading them, but I want to end with a mildly philosophical one, and then after we will have time for closing remarks. What will you do to improve our public discourse, reform institutions as necessary, and promote democracy? We'll start with Clayton on this one.
We're in an incredibly fortunate time where we are more connected to each other than ever before. We can be connected online, we can be connected in rooms just like this, and we can be connected even when people are representing each other, when their representatives at Queen's Park lobbying for them. I think that we need to make sure that we keep maintaining those lines open at all times. That would involve regular meet and greets, having a constituency office that is open to and answered for that is open and available to everybody at all times. That's going to mean actually responding to emails, not just with form letters, not just with something that's spewed into ChatGPT. We need to make sure that we're actually making investments to listen to and hear from their community. We've had incredible representatives who have made updates explaining exactly what they voted on, why they voted on it. You deserve that level of transparency from your representation. We are at a moment now where you have direct lines of communication to just about anybody, where you can have open dialogue, open discussion, open debates, and I'll be honest, we're not always going to agree on everything. But you should understand why your representative has made a decision and made a vote. They should be beholden to answering all of that. I would support inviting more people into our constituency offices. And I would encourage you, do make appointments with your current representatives and the newly elected representatives after February 27th, because we are here to represent you. Your opinion matters. Your voice matters. We all have opinions, but we need to shape those by the feedback and the input from our communities. If you're able, come by, chat in person. My office is located at 33 Bridgeport. I would love to see you there already. If not, please reach out online, because I want to make sure that I'm being a strong local voice for Waterloo, to amplify your voice, not just share my opinions, but be a strong representative for this community that represents the values and the morals of Waterloo.
Thank you, Clayton. We'll go to Ashlyn Clancy now.
There's a few things that are really flawed with our system. I remember visiting Mike Morris in the House of Commons and being shocked and appalled at how our elected officials treat each other. You know, part of me wishes that we could show more than just the person speaking, but the behavior of the people around, because I think if people were on camera, they wouldn't behave like they behave in government. And when there's small children watching when I'm an MPP, I always hope that teachers have given them a disclaimer being like, it's okay, you can't act like this in class. Some of the things, unfortunately, with the erosion of good media and journalism in this country, we see more and more people shifting online and using an algorithm. I think the stat was that in Twitter, you're 6 times more likely to see a lie than the truth. So we need to do a better job of regulating some of the media that we consume and investing and protecting good media and good journalism that we have in our community. Too often I hear from the very elected officials who lead our province lies and misinformation that causes so much harm. Part of it, too, we need to get rid of money in politics. Since Ford government took office, we have, I think, doubled, if not tripled, the amount that people can donate to a political party. That means that those party donors have a lot of influence over elected official. Fundraising is a big part of the game. I hate it myself. We rely on a lot of people and a lot of small donations, but you see how much that money matters. We end up focusing on Super Bowl ads instead of healthy debates and other ways of getting information across, and it corrupts our government, I truly believe. And finally, I believe in electoral reform. The first past-the-post system, if you look at democracies across the world, is flawed. Worst democracies happen when we have first past the post. We are not in a two-party system. We need to insist that people bring back that conversation, have a citizens' assembly, and look at better ways to vote that better reflect our society.
Thank you, Ashlyn. And now we'll go to Catherine Fife.
Thank you, and I will say I think it is a philosophical question, and it's one that keeps me up at night. I have seen a steady erosion of democratic rights, particularly in the last 7 years. Even the manipulation of the standing orders and bypassing, transparency and accountability. That every member is elected to that house, and they have a responsibility to represent their constituents. And when they are shut down by the government of the day with a majority government. And let's just be clear, Doug Ford didn't need to call this election. He has a mandate, he has a majority, he's just greedy. But my viewpoint on where our democracy is that I'm a big believer in following where the money is, where the money goes. And so the Auditor General does an amazing job in this province of finding those gaps. And so when you look at where the money is going and following the money, you can see what kind of government we're dealing with. And so my goal as the finance critic and Treasury Board critic over the last few years has been to expose where the money is going. And that is why there is a criminal RCMP investigation into this government. So my job, as I see it, is to show people what is really happening at Queen's Park, expose this corrupt government for who they are, and then try to rectify and correct this misappropriation of funding, but also misuse of power. And I have no problem speaking truth to power, and I've done so for the last 12 and a half years in this community, and I'm not going to stop tomorrow.
Thank you very much. And there are so many questions we didn't get to, but as you heard Clayton say, and I'm sure all of the candidates agree, you can ask your questions of candidates online or at other forums as well. But I do now want to, because we are getting short on time here, I do want to call on each candidate to make a 2-minute closing remark, and we will start where we ended off there. We will start with Catherine Fife.
I just want to say thank you to the organizers. I do want to say I think the one person who should go to the Martin Luther Center for Public Ethics is Doug Ford. I'd like to enroll him in the program. because certainly he has, as a premier, he has a very different idea of servant leadership, right? He has his interests and his agenda, and they are overriding the strength of our democracy. And they are shutting voices down in our democracy. And one quick example, it would be I brought forward Lydia's Law to address the number of sexual assault cases that are being thrown out and stayed in the province of Ontario. And last year was 1,326. So those people walked free. And he shut down my debate. He sent my bill right to committee without debate. It's happened 4 times in the legislature since this government has taken power. So they are no friends to women. They are no friends to our democracy. They do not believe that the rules apply to them. And so I believe that this election, we are literally fighting for the province of Ontario. And so I really need people to get engaged. I need you to get angry. I need you to speak up. I need you to stand up. I need you to vote. Because literally this work is grinding day in and day out, and people are being hurt by the government that is supposed to be helping them. So let's stand together. Let's find a little bit of that national unity right here in this election, in this province, and let's fight for our democracy.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Clayton Moore. 2-minute closing comment.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for listening. I'm maybe going to end at the beginning. My name's Clayton Moore. I'm running to be your next member of provincial parliament. I may not exactly be a natural politician. I studied science. I have degrees in molecular biology and genetics, and then moved on to bioinformatics, where I studied the evolutionary dynamics of viruses. I believe in data-driven policymaking. I believe that we are in a critical moment right now in Ontario, where foundations, where our systems that we rely on so much are already starting to show cracks. And they're showing cracks because Doug Ford has actively ignored them. We talked about a few of them here today. And 4 minutes is not enough time to do it justice for just how much we can be struggling in Ontario now. There's more information on my website on my plan, voteclayton.ca, but I encourage you to take a look, because we need to make historic investments into healthcare. We need to partner every single Ontarian with a family doctor as soon as possible. That's why the Ontario Liberal Party is promising to invest $3.1 billion to do it. We need to modernize our healthcare system. I think it's embarrassing that we are still relying on fax machines when my mom has been able to track me for every single day, every single minute of every single day because of my phone. The fact that she can do that, except if I go into an emergency room, they don't know my medical history, is an embarrassment. It's a failure. We have the resources to do it. We have the expertise here locally. We have the expertise in Canada and Ontario. We just need a government that's willing to stand up and fight for you instead of the wealthy, well-connected insiders. I want to be a part of that government. My name is Clayton Moore, and I'm running to be Waterloo's next member of provincial parliament.
Thank you, Clayton. And now, the final 2-minute closing statement from Aisling Clancy.
It's my first debate of the year, so I'm getting all my dust off me. I'm Aisling Clancy, and it's been a pleasure to serve Kitchener Centre as MPP and now be the Green Party candidate in that riding. In the by-election and city council election and right now, we have knocked on thousands and thousands and thousands of doors. And that is the way we do politics. We do it through people power. And what I appreciate about that approach, we don't have deep pockets for big ads, but we listen to people and we look them in the face, old school style. Sometimes I know I'm maybe the only person that person has talked to that day, and I'm okay to sit and listen for a while. It's a bit cold. But I take my job really seriously. It was never a plan to be a politician, but I saw the leadership in this province taking things in the wrong direction. That's why I put forward the bill Keeping People Housed Act that would end rent evictions that are happening to seniors and folks with disabilities and newcomers, stop the above guideline increases, and really fix renters' issues so that they can be sure they have a roof and food. I lobbied hard for school nutrition dollars. We had teachers calling me crying because they were cutting bananas in 4. We had a 4 times increase in our region for nutrition for learning because kids were hungry. We got $108 million for school nutrition programs in Ontario, and I'm proud to be part of the group lobbying for that. And I got my first bill passed with all 4-party support. But I'm not in it for me. I'm in it for the people who come to my office and tell me what they need. I'm in it for the people whose doors I knock on, who say that they're struggling to pay the bills. And it's time to stop the gouging. It's time to get money out of politics, and it's time to stand up for the priorities that people care for and fight for the fairness that we demand in our society. We want to be sure that we take care of everybody in Ontario, not just wealthy donors who have a lot of power right now. Let's fight for fairness, and I'm excited to be your next MPP for Kitchener Centre. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just want to say another thank you to the 3 candidates, Clayton Moore, Liberal candidate for Waterloo, Catherine Fife, the NDP candidate for Waterloo, and Aisling Clancy, the Green Party candidate for Kitchener Centre. Thank you so much for your time tonight. I also want to thank our 3 experts for taking time out to come and shine a light on some very important topics. Dr. Kai Reimer-Watts, Dr. Michael Laurie, and Tony D'Amato Storts. Thank you to all of you for coming as well. And I do want to thank Martin Luther University College for putting this on, and it was an honor for me to spend some time with you tonight and hear all of this. So thank you so much, and thank you to all the volunteers who are working so hard to do this. Can't do this without volunteers, so thank you very much. Thank you. Good night, everybody. Drive safe.